Let's move on with the most used past tense in German, the Perfekt. The Perfekt is mainly used in spoken language, and it's our equivalent of the present perfect in English. But what was the present perfect again? Sentences like I have played with him or we have talked for a while are sentences that use the present perfect. They use the auxiliary verb to have and the past participle of the corresponding verb. For example, have played in the first sentence and have talked in the second sentence. And you will see that the German equivalent, the Perfekt, is not too far off from that. In German, we use the auxiliary verbs or Hilfsverben haben and sein, to have and to be. And then we add something that is called Partizip 2, our version of the past participle. The two sentences in German would be Ich habe mit ihm gespielt, I have played with him, ich habe mit ihm gespielt, and wir haben eine Weile geredet, we have talked for a while, wir haben eine Weile geredet. Let's first focus on the first part, the auxiliary verbs haben and sein. As you probably remember, haben is conjugated like this. Ich habe, du hast, sie es hat, wir haben, ihr habt, and sie haben. Sein, on the other hand, is conjugated like this. Ich bin, du bist, sie es ist, wir sind, ihr seid, and sie sind. But when do we use which of the two? Most of the time we use haben as our Hilfsverb, to have. For example, hoffen, können, and so on all use haben as their Hilfsverb. Sein, on the other hand, is only used with verbs that indicate movement or change. For example, laufen, fliegen, or sein. So to walk, to fly, and to be, for example. Everything else, so all of the other verbs, use haben. So if in doubt, use haben. Don't worry, if you confuse the two, native speakers can usually still understand you. The only problem is it sounds really odd. So haben in most of the cases and sein in verbs that indicate movement or change. Let's practice that. In the following, I will give you a verb, and your task is to decide whether we use haben or sein. So for example, I could give you the verb reden, and your task would be to say if we use the Hilfsverb haben in the Perfekt or sein. And because reden, to talk, doesn't indicate any action and any movement, we use the Hilfsverb or auxiliary verb haben. For example, the sentence I talked would be Ich habe geredet. Ich habe geredet. Now the second part, so geredet, doesn't really matter for now. The only thing that's important for us is that we use haben and not sein. Are you ready for another example? This time it's your turn. Our verb is schwimmen, to swim. Schwimmen. Do we use haben in this case or do we use sein? What do you think? The correct answer would be sein, because schwimmen indicates movement. And as we just learned, verbs that indicate movement use the Hilfsverb sein. So for example, if you want to say I have swum or I swam, in German this would be Ich bin geschwommen. Ich bin geschwommen. And bin is the first person singular of sein. We use sein as our Hilfsverb. Okay, let's have one more. This time our verb is spielen, to play. Spielen. Which Hilfsverb or auxiliary verb would we use here? Haben or sein? If you like, you can pause the video and try for yourself. The correct answer would be haben. For example, if you want to say I have played, in German this would be Ich habe gespielt. Ich habe gespielt. And habe is the first person singular of haben. Spielen is not a verb that indicates movement or change, and that's why we use haben as our Hilfsverb. Are you ready for one final example? This time our verb is fahren, to drive. Fahren. This one is fairly easy, but what do you think? Which Hilfsverb do we use here? Sein or haben? Again, if you like, you can pause the video and try for yourself. The correct solution here would be the verb sein. because fahren indicates movement, to drive. And as we learned, verbs that indicate movement always use sein as their Hilfsverb. Therefore, if you wanted to say, for example, I have driven, in German this would be ich bin gefahren. Ich bin gefahren. And bin is the first person singular of sein. Okay, I think the Hilfsverb is clear. So part 1 of the perfect is done. Now let's move on with part 2, the Partizip 2, aka Partizip Perfekt, the German version of the past participle. In regular verbs, it's formed like this. You take the root of the verb. For example, if you take the verb haben, the root would be hab. And then you add ge at the front and t at the back. So haben becomes gehabt. And wollen, for example, to want to, would become gewollt. The root of wollen is woll. And then you just add ge at the front, ge, and t at the back, t, gewollt. So far so good. Now it's your turn again. I will give you a verb and your task is to convert the verb into a past participle form. Remember, in German we form this by starting with ge, so ge, then we take the root of the verb and then we add t. For example, if I give you kochen, you first need to find out the root of kochen. And that's pretty easy because you just need to leave out the en at the end of kochen. So the infinitive ending. So the root of kochen is koch. Now you just need to add the ge at the front, ge, and the t at the back. And tada! The past participle or Partizip Perfekt, Partizip 2, of kochen is gekocht. Gekocht. Now you're on your own. The next verb is schauen, to watch. Schauen. What's the past participle of schauen? If you like, you can pause the video and try for yourself. The correct solution would be geschaut. Geschaut. The root of schauen is schau, and then we just add the ge at the front and the t at the back. Geschaut. Are you ready for another one? This time we take the verb hoffen, to hope. Hoffen. How do you form the past participle here? The correct answer would be gehofft. Gehofft. Hoff is the root of hoffen. And then again you add ge at the front and t at the back. Gehofft. So far, so easy, but German wouldn't be German if there wouldn't be any exceptions. But this time we really have you covered. Remember the 3 forms of irregular verbs that we learned in the last video? So in English this would be verbs like do, did, done, swear, swore, sworn, and so on. And in German these 3 forms also exist. The first form is always the infinitive. The second one is the Präteritum form, so the simple past form. And the third one, you guessed it, is the Partizip 2, the past participle. So all you need to do is take a look at the table in the additional material, look for the verb, and then take the third form. In the case of tun, this would be getan, and in the case of schwören, this would be geschworen. By the way, those are the same examples that I had in English. So do, did, done in German would be tun, tat, and getan. And swear, swore, sworn would be schwören, schwor, and geschworen in German. Do you see the similarity? So some of the exceptions in both German and English even have the same root. So that's all you need to know to form the perfect in German. Let's put it all together. We form the perfect by taking the Hilfsverb haben or sein, of which we learned that in most cases we use haben, but sein is used for verbs that indicate movement or change. And then, after the Hilfsverb, we add the Partizip 2. Most of the time, we form the Partizip 2 by taking the root of our verb and then just adding ge at the front and t at the back. For example, machen would become gemacht, wollen would become gewollt, and so on. And for all of the irregular forms, the past participle is simply the third form in our irregular verbs table. So each irregular verb, like gehen for example, to go, has 3 irregular forms. The infinitive, the simple past form or Präteritum form, and the past participle or Partizip 2. All you need to do is look for the Partizip 2, in this case gegangen. Gehen, ging, gegangen. And that's it. That way you can form sentences like ich bin in die Schule gegangen, for example. Bin gegangen, ich bin in die Schule gegangen. Er hat es gewusst, he knew it. Er hat es gewusst. Ich habe einen Artikel gelesen, habe gelesen, have read. Wir sind nach Berlin geflogen, sind geflogen, and so on. We always have the Hilfsverb or auxiliary verb at first, and then we add the Partizip Perfekt. Now to its usage, because there's a little difference between the past perfect in English and the perfect in German. While the present perfect in English is mainly used for actions in the past that still have relevance for the present, the perfect in German is used for almost all actions in the past in spoken language, so it's our past form for spoken language. That's why we also use it to translate sentences that use the simple past in English. For example, he knew it in spoken language wouldn't be wusste es, so the Präteritum, but it would be hat es gewusst. Perfekt. Or I went to school wouldn't be ich ging zur Schule, so Präteritum or simple past, but it would be ich bin in die Schule gegangen, but only in spoken language. Remember, in most cases we use the Präteritum in written language and the perfect in spoken language. And that's basically all you need to know about it. Now it's time for some more practice. In the following we will have some exercises that will help you learn the Partizip 2 or Partizip Perfekt, the formation of the perfect, and when to use it. And once we're done with that, we'll already move on with our final past tense in German, the Plusquamperfekt. Bis gleich, see you soon.